This is a full story. Puppy wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. 6 years later, he was just like he was back then. He had the young and tender intern sitting on his lap. Everyone thought that even if I saw with my own eyes that he had another woman, I wouldn't dare to say the word break up. But this time, I suddenly got fed up. On a night with torrential rain, I dragged my suitcase and left. After a long while, Tony casually called, "The rain is too heavy, you can leave tomorrow." I didn't respond, and the phone, pressed to my ear, was suddenly taken away. I instinctively looked back, only to be pressed tightly against the floor-to-ceiling window by him. When the call ended, Rocky whispered in my ear, "Haley, the rain is so heavy, why don't you stay at my place tonight?" When I walked in, Tony had a young girl sitting on his lap. Beige silk blouse, black pencil skirt, the uniform of a secretary or an intern. Slightly mature and intellectual, yet worn with youthful awkwardness by the girl. When she saw me, the girl instantly turned crimson with embarrassment. She struggled to get off Tony's lap, but he merely lifted his eyelids and glanced at me indifferently. His arms tightened around her a bit more. "Don't be afraid, I'm here." He wore that charming face, but his soothing voice was incredibly gentle. In a daze, I suddenly remembered my 19. He used to coax me like this, coaxing me to kiss him, to embrace him, coaxing me to go to a hotel with him, coaxing me to not be afraid and to trust him. And now, the same words, the same gentleness, were being used on a younger girl. I suddenly laughed. Tony reeked of alcohol, his eyes glazed with a drunken haze. "Haley, why are you laughing?" I slowly stopped smiling and softly said, "Tony, let's end it here." After saying this, I didn't wait for him to speak, nor did I pay attention to the suddenly silent people in the room. I just took off the plain ring that I had worn on my middle finger for 5 years, gently placing it on the coffee table in front of Tony. I turned and walked out. Tony made no sound to stop me. Naturally, he didn't get up to chase after me. We had been together for 5 years, and he had long become a hot new figure in the port city, while I was just a minor anchor at a television station. So, even if I saw him with another woman, no one would believe that I would say the word break up. When closing the door, I heard voices from behind. "Haley is just having a moment of difficulty getting off stage. Tony, you should coax her properly when you get home." "No need." Tony laughed. "You might as well ask her if she dares to break up. All these years, I've given her a place to stay. I've given her a home." Tony, calm and high-handed, said, "She neither dares nor is willing to." I gripped the doorknob, standing still, straightening my back, but tears suddenly streamed down. In my youth, because he promised me a home, I was moved and fell for him. Yet years later, the promises once made became the sword that pierced my heart. Indeed, those closest to you are the ones who know best how to hurt you deeply. I spent 3 days packing at home. During those 3 days, many mutual friends subtly questioned me. I didn't reply. I just calmly packed all my things one by one. On the night before I was to leave, I carefully checked the entire house, ensuring that not even a single strand of my hair was left behind. I called for a cab. After the moving truck took all my luggage away, a torrential rain suddenly fell on the port island. Thunderstorms are the weather I fear most. When I was young, my parents passed away on such a night, and back then, Tony used to accompany me every such rainy night. I was once incredibly reliant on him, but now, I no longer need it. The taxi drove me into the pouring rain. I watched the waterfall like streams on the car window. In a daze, suddenly, the car lost control, skidded, and came to a halt. The car behind couldn't avoid it and crashed into it. Fortunately, it wasn't severe. I looked back in panic. The rain was so heavy. The Rolls-Royce with double plates seemed like an ark on the sea, quietly lurking. The taxi driver's curses had not yet left his mouth when he abruptly shut it. A black umbrella opened, and a man in a black business suit got out of the car. His elegant leather shoes stepped into the stream like rainwater, walking to my car. The umbrella shielded from the torrential rain. Under the umbrella, the man's stern and handsome face appeared. I was incredibly surprised. My eyes widened in shock. "Mr. Rocky?" Rocky looked at me expressionlessly, his eyes gradually showing a hint of amusement. What a coincidence. The car entered Rocky's private garage. As soon as the driver got out, Rocky lifted my chin and kissed me directly. I was scared and struggled desperately, pushing him away with all my strength. But Rocky directly grabbed my wrist, his voice extremely cold. "Did you ever think about this day when you set me up back then?" My wrist was pinched painfully, but I had no words to say, only muttering apologies. "Sorry, Rocky, I'm sorry." Regardless of whether I was aware of it at the time, whether it was my intention, but Rocky was indeed set up and suffered a damaged reputation. Don't use that phrase to dismiss me. "Haley, last time I didn't lay a finger on you, yet I got accused of rape. Today, why don't we make that accusation true?" Rocky wiped the moisture from the corner of my lips. My face was pale, staring staring blankly at him. Mr. Rocky, don't try to make me soft-hearted. He leisurely pulled down my strap. You should be very clear that I'm as hard-hearted as I am stern. I closed my eyes in despair, thinking of that stormy half-month, thinking of how Rocky's name became associated with the word rapist. Although the incident was suppressed and no one dared to mention it again, but it caused him to miss out on a big project because of the damaged reputation, and that project eventually fell into Tony's hands. So, even if it was merely a coincidence, a misunderstanding, Rocky would never believe that. Such a man would never swallow this humiliation willingly. Not here, please? I gently tugged at his sleeve, tremblingly pleading without hope. Please, Rocky. Rocky smiled lightly. These words are better saved for the bed. In fact, over the past year, Tony and I have rarely shared a bed, so much so that I almost forgot the taste of passion. And before Rocky and I had completely aligned, I was in so much pain that I couldn't help but hit him and bite his arm. Rocky, can you go out for a moment? My whole body was trembling, sweat forming layers on my forehead. But Rocky didn't seem to fare much better. He had a tense expression, his Adam's apple bobbing violently, his voice husky. It seems your man isn't up to it, Haley. Can we not talk about him? I lowered my gaze. Tony and I have broken up. There's nothing between us anymore. Rocky suddenly fixed a steady gaze on me, and in the next moment, the man who had been relentless suddenly withdrew and pulled away. I let out a sudden breath of relief, instinctively loosening my grip on his arm. But then, Rocky tightened his hold around my waist. The raging volcano collided with the molten lava. My fingertips sank into his flesh, my voice shattered by the impact. Outside, the rain poured heavily. The loud noise masked all the intimate sounds in the room. In the early morning, the rain hadn't stopped. Rocky carried my drenched body to the floor-to-ceiling window. My phone rang incessantly, over and over, refusing to stop. It was Tony calling. With trembling fingers, I answered. You've moved out? His voice devoid of any emotion. My fingers touched the cold glass as I answered hoarsely. Yes. When? Tonight. The rain is too heavy. You could leave tomorrow. His voice sounded indifferent. How ridiculous. Before I could respond, the phone at my ear was suddenly taken away. Instinctively, I looked back, only to find Rocky pressing me tightly against the floor-to-ceiling window. He glanced at the lit phone screen, leaned in close, and ended the call. Haley, the rain is so heavy. Why don't you stay at my place tonight? I shook my head, my wet hair sticking to my back. The stark contrast of black and white created a jarring visual impact. Rocky lowered his head and kissed my neck one more time. I didn't refuse, just softly asked, "Can we settle things, okay?" Rocky's eyes suddenly turned cold. He smiled and grasped my long hair. "If you want to settle things, that can be arranged." The wet long hair coiled around his slender fingers. He applied slight pressure, pulling me closer to him. With his other hand, he held my chin, lifting my face. The night was deep, but his eyes were deeper than the night. "Then let me make that accusation true, Haley. That way, it'll be settled." My scalp tingled. In reality, Rocky hadn't used much force. Actually, before tonight, I could sense he had been holding back. Otherwise, I'd probably have been torn apart by now. After all, there's a significant physical disparity between us. If he intended to exact revenge, the only one suffering would be me. Perhaps because we had done the most intimate act between a man and a woman tonight. Once that line is crossed, many things change imperceptibly. Strangely, I wasn't too fearful. I just looked up at him, even managing a smile. "Rocky, go ahead and make it true. Just one thing." I slightly lifted on my toes and kissed the corner of his lips. "I don't want to be hurt. After all, my job requires me to be on screen." Perhaps it was the first time I actively pleased him. He looked down, matching my kiss, his voice dropping a few notches. "Haley, you have a second choice." "What choice?" "You can be proactive and please me, and maybe I'll let you go." My eyes widened in shock. Rocky was different from Tony. His reputation was never very good. His rise to power was said to be far from clean. But in recent years, as his business empire expanded, he had gradually shed his underworld aura. I still remember his interview with a financial magazine last year. He was dignified, composed, and restrained. Even media people flattered him, calling him a refined businessman. So, many almost forgot. Rocky wasn't a young master cultivated by a prestigious family for decades. 10 years ago, he was still working at the docks. At his core, he lacked gentlemanly demeanor. "What's wrong?" Rocky's lips curled up. "Afraid?" I shook my head, but couldn't help biting my lip. "No, it's just that I don't know how." Rocky's smile faded gradually. "After so many years of dating, Tony never taught you?" Before I could speak, Rocky continued, "You seemed pretty good at it that night." My face turned crimson instantly. I had only thought it was my drunken state causing me to act out. But later, I realized that there might have been something illicit in my drink. Otherwise, even if I were drunk, I wouldn't have clung to a man and tried to undress him. At that time, I think someone must have drugged my drink, which is why I acted like that. Rocky looked down at me, his face devoid of any smile. Didn't you ask Tony what he put in your drink? I was a bit taken aback. Mr. Rocky, that was just an accident. But after saying this, I couldn't help but feel some doubts. When Tony took that project, I wondered if he had plotted against me. But at that time, Tony and I hadn't broken up yet. People tend to favor those they like deep down. Now that Tony and I were completely separated, some thoughts began to change. Rocky suddenly released his grip. He looked at me with a detached and indifferent gaze. I'm going to take a shower. He turned and went straight to the bathroom. When Rocky came out of the bathroom, I was still standing by the window. The rain had fallen all night. The entire Port Island was swallowed by the misty water vapor. Everything outside was unclear. I stood there in a daze. Rocky came up from behind and hugged me. He still carried the chill of the water, making me shiver. What are you thinking about? Thinking about what was said earlier. Rocky snorted. You might want to think about how to make me let you go. Rocky, I'm not in the mood. But before I could finish, he kissed me fiercely. Haley, thinking about other men in front of me. Do you think I was too kind to you the previous 2 times? He kissed me more intensely, but his eyes held a frosty coldness. I suddenly felt scared. This Rocky was a completely different person from before. From his eyes, I could clearly sense that this time, he would show no mercy. Rocky, my survival instinct made me put aside all my pride. It said Rocky was noticed by a big shot because of his ruthlessness and willingness to take risks, and rose swiftly to prominence. Such a person wouldn't value human life lightly. While I responded to his kiss, I wrapped my arms around his neck. You said I should be proactive. I don't know how, but I will learn. Will you teach me? I'll definitely learn seriously. After the long kiss ended, Rocky chuckled lightly. All right. When I straddled his muscular waist, my face was already flushed beyond recognition. But Rocky lifted his hand and brushed my long hair, which had fallen in front of my chest, to the back. I bit my lip tightly, trying to hold onto my arms to cover my chest, but he grabbed my wrist. Rocky, I stared at him, tears welling in my eyes, but he remained unmoved. Haley, Rocky's voice was cold and distant. We've already done everything. There's no need to be so pretentious and hide. And it's raining heavily outside. You can be louder. I shook my head through my tears. I can't. Rocky, please. Don't push me. I really can't. I lowered my head, tears falling one by one onto his chest. I was afraid he would get angry and try to pull my hand away to wipe them off. But he tightened his grip even more. Rocky didn't say anything. He just looked at the woman straddling him and silently crying. She wasn't exceptionally beautiful. Her figure was too thin. Her personality wasn't particularly charming. She cried at the slightest provocation. Any slight comment from him seemed to shock her deeply, as if he could kill her at any moment. And she had just broken up with a 6-year boyfriend. Rocky's brow furrowed slightly. He hadn't expected to get involved with such a woman, but ironically, after the failed attempt to force her, he often found himself thinking about that night, thinking about her stripping him and riding on him, thinking about how he held her wrists to keep her from acting out, her tearful, pitiful appearance. If it were purely about physical attraction, there had been countless women trying to throw themselves at him over the years. He had seen plenty of them stripping off and clinging to him, but he had never reacted this way. In fact, he often regretted why he hadn't gone with the flow that night, why he hadn't solidified that accusation. He felt like he had become a pervert, monitoring Haley and Tony 24 hours a day. From the minute she moved out of Tony's house, he followed her car like a stalker. The moment he took Haley away, he blamed everything on his desire for revenge. But despite wanting to get back at her, he couldn't help but care about her feelings and experiences. Even before, he had always restrained himself, never fully indulged. Even so, Haley still seemed like she had suffered a great injustice. Just now, she was even defending that scumbag Tony. He had genuinely wanted to throw her out into the heavy rain to wake her up. But in the end, I took a cold shower. Rocky despised himself for this. He had always believed that a man should never be controlled by a woman. He was determined not to be soft-hearted this time. But when Haley lowered her head and cried, his heart was softened by her tears. Rocky lifted his hand. The rough pads of his fingers touched Haley's full lips. She was petite and slim, but her cherry-red lips were plump and slightly sensual. The kiss felt really good, so much so that he seemed to prefer kissing her more than being with her physically. He liked making her cry and dirtying her. What are you crying about? Rocky pinched my chin. I had to lift my face, but tears continued to fall. I just said a few things to you. You haven't done anything. Rocky wiped the tears from the corner of my eyes. You're crying like this, and someone who doesn't know might think I really forced you. I'm sorry. I gazed at him blankly, but I couldn't stop the tears. All right. Rocky suddenly straightened up and lifted me off him. He grabbed a thin blanket and wrapped it around me. If you stop crying now, we'll go to sleep. I couldn't believe it, staring at him with teary eyes. I stood there motionless, like a fool. Rocky smirked. What? Don't want to sleep? I shook my head vigorously and immediately closed my eyes. Rocky pulled back the blanket and lay down. I instinctively curled up, trying to distance myself from him, but Rocky pulled me into his arms. Haley. Sleep quietly, don't move around. Or if you cause a fire, you'll have to put it out yourself. Got it. I lay still, not daring to move. Until Rocky's breathing became steady, I tentatively moved my stiff body, but just as I was about to get out of his arms, Rocky rolled over and pressed me down. Haley, I said not to tease me. I didn't. If I say you did, then you did. In the darkness, Rocky lowered his head and kissed me. It seemed he particularly enjoyed kissing, and this kiss was exceptionally long. When the kiss finally ended, I suddenly realized that, without knowing when, Rocky and I had become deeply connected. This experience was clearly different from the previous two. I anxiously grasped his arm. Rocky. It was too intense. I was trembling uncontrollably. Rocky's strong arms supported my body on both sides. He leaned down, his breath brushing my ear. Haley, has he been here? I felt a thunderous explosion in my head. Tears gushed from my eyes, but I couldn't tell if it was physiological pleasure or fear from the unfamiliar experience. But the fingers gripping his arm were weak and powerless. I felt like I was a harbor island soaked by heavy rain. In the next moment, I might be shattered by that powerful external force. The rain was noisy. In the dimly lit room, Rocky suddenly grabbed my hand and pressed it against his lower abdomen. His taut muscles were covered in watermarks. Haley. His voice was hoarse and deep, yet with a trace of satisfied pleasure. Look, you're more powerful than the heavy rain outside. I felt dazed, like a small boat adrift on a stormy sea. I couldn't understand his words. I only felt that my small boat was about to be crushed by the waves. The heavy rain in the harbor island didn't wet me, but you've made me almost soaked. Haley, how are you going to make it up to me? When I woke up again, the rain had cleared. Rocky wasn't in the room. I went to the bathroom and soaked in the tub for a long time. My mind was still in a mess. When I came out of the bathroom and turned on my phone, countless messages and missed calls came in. Several were from Tony. I didn't call back. I just deleted all his contact information. I had taken some leave, so I didn't need to go to work at the station for the next few days. The moving company had also delivered my luggage to the new apartment, less than 20 square meters, with a monthly rent of nearly $20,000. For me, it was a significant expense. Fortunately, Tony had been generous to me over the years, and I had saved up some money, so I didn't need to worry about daily expenses. The only trouble now was Rocky, but when I went downstairs, I didn't see him at all. I had a meal in the dining room and tentatively suggested leaving. The servant at Rocky's house didn't stop me. Instead, they sent a driver to politely take me back to my apartment. I pondered all the way. I concluded that the debt between Rocky and me should be cleared. This conclusion made me breathe a sigh of relief. Clearing things up was a good thing. After all, a man like Rocky was too difficult to deal with. But after one night, I felt completely drained. If we were together every night, my life would be in danger. The new apartment isn't large, and I don't have much luggage. It only took me half a day to get everything organized. A one-bedroom, one-living-room small unit is enough for me, though it doesn't compare to Tony's large, luxurious flat. Lying on my own small bed now brings me comfort. The afternoon sun is warm, and I don't know when I fell asleep. In my dreams, I was back at 19. Tony was soothing me. We tasted forbidden fruit in a hotel room. Afterwards, I cried continuously. Not just from pain, but from fear. He held me tightly, slipping a simple ring onto my middle finger. Haley, we'll get married when you graduate. I cried in the dream. But I knew very well those tears weren't for Tony. They were for the naive 19-year-old Haley, for that lonely Haley who longed for a home. After deleting Tony's contact information, he never tried to reach me again. I also faded out of the circles I used to be in, so I hardly heard anything about him. When the holiday ended, I returned to work at the station. Suddenly, I heard an unexpected piece of news. Serena, another female host who had never gotten along with me, managed to invite the current Hong Kong newcomer, Tony, onto her show. The whole station was buzzing. After all, everyone in Hong Kong knew that Tony never appeared on any show. He didn't even accept interviews. I sat at my desk, stunned. Back then, my show nearly got canceled due to poor ratings. Tony had just started to rise. He was handsome and charming, much sought after. The station's leaders had repeatedly tried to get him on a show or an interview, but he had refused. I had even thought about asking him, even just for a written interview without revealing our relationship. Tony had also refused me, but now, he was going on Serena's show, without any stringent conditions. The station had prepared a wide range of questions, including the viewer's favorite topic, relationship issues. Yet he knew Serena and I had a poor relationship. Since we started interning after graduation, she had always tried to undermine me. Tony must have done this on purpose, but I couldn't understand why. He had a new lover now. I had moved out to make room for someone new. Shouldn't he be grateful to me? Unable to make sense of it, I decided not to dwell on it. After all, Serena had her own skills and luck. For now, I had no other options. I could only focus on doing my job well. But in the afternoon, I received another rejection from the new Best Actress's agent. I wasn't surprised. After all, the show had always been mediocre. The guests we managed to get were mostly minor celebrities. Haley, you need to think of something quickly. Serena's episode is bound to be a huge hit. If our show gets cancelled, it'll be a natural outcome. I know, I'll think of a solution. If only we could get Rocky to come on. Of course, that's just a dream. My partner sighed and shook her head. Serena's luck is really something. The station had originally planned to cancel her show. Who knew she managed to get Tony? Haley, do you think there might be something between them? I thought for a moment. I heard Tony has a girlfriend. Serena probably has nothing to do with him. But I was soon proven wrong. In the afternoon, Serena received 999 red roses. At 6, Tony's Bentley was parked outside the TV station's main entrance. Serena changed into a beautiful strapless dress and happily got into Tony's car. By 9 in the evening, I saw on Serena's Instagram that the restaurant Tony took her to was my favorite revolving restaurant. The photo showed 3 dishes, all my favorites. The gentleman holding the knife and fork had long fingers, with a simple ring on his middle finger. I had seen that ring for 6 years. I knew it well. It was Tony's. I smiled and put down my phone to take a shower. When I came out of the bathroom, an old friend suddenly called me. I answered, but it was Tony's voice. Haley. His voice was slightly cold, tinged with clear drunkenness. If you move back, I'll appear on your show. I couldn't help but laugh. Tony, I decided to leave that day, and I'm not coming back. Haley, you should know, if I really go on Serena's show, your show will be cancelled and you'll be unemployed. So what? Tony's voice suddenly became gentle. I fired that intern, and I haven't touched her. Haley, you don't have family. Your relatives are distant. You should know that only I am your support. Tony, I used to think that, but now, I don't need it anymore. Haley, don't be so stubborn. Don't call me again. With that, I hung up the phone. I also blocked the friend's number. Those friends were Tony's friends after all. Since we broke up, there was no need to keep in touch. My phone rang again. It was an unknown number. I naturally thought it was Tony, so I hung up and blocked it. Moments later, another unknown number sent a message. Haley, try hanging up on me again. I was a bit stunned and replied, may I ask who this is? The phone quickly rang again. I hesitated and answered. It was Rocky's voice. Haley, your courage is growing. Sorry, I didn't realize it was your call. Then who did you think it was? Tony. Yes. The call suddenly ended. I was confused but didn't call back. Until I was almost asleep, the number called again. Haley, open the door. My bedroom is very small, and the bed is even smaller. The bathroom is pitifully tiny as well. When Rocky came in after his shower and glanced at my bed, his brow furrowed. I'll sleep on the couch, I said, standing up to leave. A 1.2-meter single bed feels cramped even for just one person. But Rocky simply shut the bedroom door. I'm here to sleep with you, not just to use the bed. My face was slightly flushed. Please keep it down, and don't say such things. This place isn't soundproof. Rocky tossed the towel aside. He looked down at me with a condescending gaze. The one who should keep it down is you. As he pinned me to the bed, Rocky added, and if you cry, keep it down. Otherwise, the neighbors might think I'm assaulting and killing you. I couldn't help but glare at him. Can you stop mentioning those 2 words? Rocky, while pulling off my nightgown, smirked nonchalantly. Aren't you to blame for that? I had no words and could only stay silent. The bed was too small, making it hard to move. The lack of soundproofing made me bite my lips and keep any noise to a minimum. Rocky seemed dissatisfied. Move out tomorrow. Don't stay here. Move where? I can't afford a better place, and you know the property prices in Hong Kong. I'll buy you a place. Rocky leaned down and kissed me. Move out tomorrow. I was about to refuse. But Rocky added, if you move, I'll appear on your show. Really? Of course. But there's one condition. I'll provide the interview questions. The news that Rocky would be on my show spread around the station the next day. And even more exciting was the earth-shattering announcement brought by Rocky's secretary. Mr. Rocky will announce a piece of good news on the show. The only thing I can reveal is that it's related to his love life. The station's leaders were overjoyed. My partner was thrilled as well. Having a legendary figure like Rocky appear on television for the first time was 100 times more exciting than Tony's appearance. After all, years ago, Rocky was still working at the docks. Now he's a major figure stirring up Hong Kong's scene. Who wouldn't be curious about such a man? After the excitement died down, I made myself a cup of coffee. Sitting at my desk, I stared into space alone. Rocky would announce some good news on the show. If I guessed correctly, it must be related to his marriage. Who would be his fiancée? There are many high society ladies in Hong Kong who admire him. Several prominent families have intentions to marry him. Though Rocky's background wasn't great, and while he is successful now, he still can't match those wealthy families in terms of foundation. He'd probably marry a well-bred young lady. None of this concerns me, of course. But last night, he said he'd buy me a house and wanted me to move in. So, was he asking me to be his mistress? Though I'm just a minor television host with little influence, I would never agree to be a mistress. Not even if he's Rocky. Not even if being with him meant instant success. I didn't move into the house Rocky offered me. The next day, I handed in my resignation letter. Refusing Rocky meant the show would naturally be cancelled. Once again, I was defeated by Serena. Rather than wait for the show to be cut, I resigned on my own. But the station leaders had a peculiar expression. "Haley, you really can't resign right now." "Why not?" "Because Tony is also going to be on your show. He cancelled his appearance on Serena's show to be on yours, and it will be on the same episode as Rocky." I was stunned. Was Tony crazy, or was I mishearing? "Haley, Rocky has already agreed. And Tony will also announce some good news on the show. If this news leaks, it will shake Hong Kong. Haley, this is a huge opportunity. This show will make you famous overnight. You should take back your resignation letter." The leader handed me back the resignation letter. "Go back and prepare well. Tomorrow we start recording. You need to be in the best shape." On the way back to the office, I ran into Serena. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Seeing me, she nearly ground her teeth in hatred. "Haley, it's all your fault. It's because of you that everything I had is ruined. Tony was clearly your boyfriend, and yet you let him play me like this. What are you scheming? How can there be such a malicious woman like you?" Serena seemed to go mad suddenly, grabbing a flower pot and throwing it at me. I was wearing high heels and nearly tripped over the carpet while dodging. I could only helplessly cover my head, but the flower pot didn't hit me. Rocky, who had arrived somehow, blocked in front of me. The flower pot hit his forehead, and soon, blood began to flow. The station was in chaos. Serena was dragged out by security. Someone called for an ambulance. I sat on the ground, dazed, pressing on Rocky's forehead wound. Blood flowed from between my fingers, warm and sticky. My consciousness gradually returned. "Rocky," I called out his name, tears falling. Perhaps the tears fell too intensely. Rocky tugged at the corner of his mouth, smiling. "Haley, why are you crying again? Don't talk, you're bleeding." "Rocky, so, I'm bleeding. Why are you crying?" I couldn't answer, just stared at his bloodied face and cried uncontrollably. Rocky was taken to the emergency room for stitches. I sat dazed on the bench in the hallway, until he was pushed into the ward by the nurse and called for me. I saw the bandage on his forehead, wrapped in gauze. Such a strong and tall man, now lying there, looking pale and weak. "Does it hurt?" I asked quietly, holding back my tears. "Do you want some water?" Rocky nodded and then shook his head. "You stay here." I obediently sat by his side. "Haley, kiss me." Come here, kiss me." "Rocky, you're still injured. It's just a forehead injury. I'll get you a glass of water." I stood up to leave, but Rocky suddenly moaned softly. I was startled and rushed over to check his forehead injury. Rocky pulled me into his arms. He tilted his head to kiss me, and the kiss deepened, growing more passionate, until I was breathless. "Haley, why are you so kissable?" Rocky's fingers caressed my slightly swollen lips. He suddenly whispered something vulgar. I blushed instantly and pushed him away. "Don't even think about it." Rocky raised his eyebrows, looking somewhat cheeky. "Can't even think about it?" "Not even think about it." I gave him a stern look. "You're so shameless. Pervert. You're not wrong. I was a rogue 13 years ago. I'm ignoring you." Rocky suddenly smiled. "Haley, I'm injured. Make me some soup tonight. Have your maid make it." As soon as I said it, I regretted it. After all, Rocky got hurt because of me. I only know how to make the simplest lily and white fungus soup. "Perfect. That's my favorite soup. Then I'll make it for you tonight." Rocky's smile deepened. "Great, then make sure you do it well." I felt like his words had a different tone, but I thought I might be overthinking. That night, I made the soup for him. He drank 2 big bowls, then complained of dizziness and asked me to help him back to his room. I knew then, I wasn't wrong about this rogue who only thought about getting things done. That night was also my first time being proactive. I actively helped him undress and bathe. I climbed onto him, awkwardly taking him in bit by bit. But my stamina was lacking. In just a few minutes, I gave up and refused to move. Rocky wasn't upset. Maybe it was because of his injury. The night had a gentle and tender feel, but I liked it. In the end, I fell asleep comfortably in his arms. I didn't even remember how I took a shower. The next morning when I woke up, Rocky was still asleep. I stood by the bed, watching him for a while, and thought about many things. When I learned he was about to get engaged, I decided not to entangle with him any longer. But yesterday, he got injured because of me. Let's consider this night as settling things between us. It seems from the start, Rocky and I have always been trying to clear things up or even the score. But in any case, it feels like a proper ending. I didn't wake him. I showered and left Rocky's villa. Serena was taken away by the police. She might face detention. I submitted my resignation letter again. When I left the station, I ran into Tony. Haley, he called out to me. Standing in the bright summer sunlight, he was still handsome and charming, but he was no longer the person I once loved. Are you resigning? Yes. You used to like this job a lot, didn't you? I did like this job, but now I was indeed exhausted. Without any backing, and unwilling to accept unspoken rules, I could only be sidelined, and relying on a man to climb up always made one seem inferior. It's fine if you don't work. I never supported you working outside. It's tough and the pay is low. Tony approached me. Isn't being a full-time wife better? I told you when I first started earning money, I didn't want my wife to struggle. Now that you've resigned, come home with me, Haley. I'll support you from now on. He naturally took my hand, as if he had never been involved with that intern, as if he hadn't slept with other women, as if we had never broken up. The sun was glaring. I squinted, wondering how Tony could look so different now. I pulled my hand away. Tony, we've already broken up. Haley, okay, I know I upset you last time, but it's been so long. You should have calmed down by now. I'm not angry. I looked at him calmly. Tony, I'm serious. His smile gradually faded. Haley, you're already 25. Don't be so willful and childish. Without a job and leaving me, how will you survive in Hong Kong? Seeing me silent, he softened his tone. You've always wanted to marry me, wanted a home, haven't you? Haley, I've prepared the wedding house. It's the villa on the mountaintop on Baijia Road we looked at before. We'll decorate and furnish it just the way you like, okay? I wanted to refuse, but before I could speak, Rocky's voice suddenly came from nearby. So, Haley, you won't move into the house I gave you because his house is bigger? Rocky leaned against the car, his cigarette clenched between his lips, looking like a rogue with a careless demeanor. The wound on his head had likely been irritated, and the bandage was stained with fresh blood. I frowned instantly. You can't smoke now. Rocky lifted his hand to remove the cigarette but didn't extinguish it. However, from what I know, the largest mountaintop villa on Baijia Road was bought by me. The one he bought isn't as big as mine. Haley, you better think it through and don't throw away the big thing for a small one. Tony's face turned pale with anger. Rocky, what are you implying? Rocky shrugged. Isn't it obvious? I'm giving my woman a house. Your woman. Tony clenched his teeth. When did she become your woman? Rocky smiled. Wasn't it you who sent her to me back then? Tony's expression changed abruptly. Rocky didn't waste more words with him. I've had all the alcohol and drinks Haley had back then preserved, and now they've all been sent to the police. Mr. Tony, if you are innocent, then the law will clear your name. But if you are indeed guilty, the law will not spare you. Neither will I. Rocky extinguished the cigarette just as the police car arrived. He said no more and walked past the dejected Tony to stand in front of me. Haley, I've been a good person for nearly 5 years. Now, can I like you? I stared wide-eyed. The hot wind blew by. Memories, nearly forgotten, suddenly rushed back. A girl who had just lost her parents in a shipwreck. A young thug who struggled for a living at the docks. 2 people who shouldn't have intersected, suddenly connected by that accident. The anxious girl wiped the blood off the injured boy's face during a fight and put a cartoon bandage from her backpack on his forehead. The boy, dazed, held onto her white skirt, and she, with a kind heart, sat with him on the dirty ground and stayed with him. Later, when they parted, the boy asked the frail girl, "What's your name? Can I come find you later? Can I, like you?" The girl gave him the bandages and change from her backpack. She just smiled, saying, "Then you should be a good person. Fighting boys can't like me, and I won't like them. If you're a good person, then can you like me? Of course, being liked is a happy thing." She waved at him. "I'm leaving, and I won't come here again." She lost her parents and would stay with relatives. She was leaving, going to a new school, starting a completely different life. Later, grown up, she had long forgotten that small event. She met attractive boys she liked, and foolishly gave her heart away. Yet, in the long river of time, there was one person who never forgot her for even a minute. No one knew the hardships he endured to reach today, to become a good person. But by then, the person in his heart had already been liked by someone. Even so, he never thought of finding another woman or liking someone else. Until that night, until that accident happened. Actually, he saw through such clumsy methods instantly, having experienced countless storms. But what he was thinking at that moment was only one thought: not to let her get hurt, not to make her sad. So, he swallowed his anger. He didn't seek revenge on Tony until he heard from someone telling her that she was packing to move out of Tony's house, until he saw her leaving with a suitcase. He couldn't wait a second longer. He took her back to his home. "Is it you?" The almost vague memory gradually came into focus, and the Rocky in front of me and the young man with a buzz cut and tattoos could not overlap in any way. "Your tattoo. I've long since removed it. I just didn't have money back then, so it left scars." Rocky rolled up his sleeve, showing me the scars on his arm. Indeed, there were several clear scar marks. "Haley, you haven't answered me." Rocky's expression was very serious. "Are you sure you're a good person now? What kind of good person behaves like you?" Rocky frowned slightly. "Haley." He took a step forward and kissed me gently. "You're the best when you're being kissed. In broad daylight, with people coming and going." I reached out to push him away, but he covered his head wound and groaned, "Haley, my wound hurts." I was instantly frightened and didn't dare to move. Rocky was satisfied after kissing me for a while and then said, "Will you make me soup tonight?" "Not a chance." "Haley, why do you always think of unhealthy things? I only asked you to make me soup, with no other intention." Rocky looked extremely serious. I couldn't help but question whether I was indeed thinking too much. "Really?" Rocky nodded very seriously. I reluctantly got into his car. After making the lily and white fungus soup, he drank 2 big bowls. Then, pretending to be dizzy from the injury, he tricked me into helping him upstairs. That led us to the bed. When he hugged me and sat me on his lap, I raised my hand to stop him. "Rocky, you mentioned announcing a piece of good news earlier. What is it?" There were some things I needed to clarify. After all, even if I was somewhat moved by him, and even if we had a history from our childhood, I didn't want to be a third party, hidden away. If he was really going to marry someone else, then ending things now wouldn't be too painful. Rocky lay on the bed, looking at me, and frowned. "Haley, with me in this state, do you still have the energy to ask these questions?" I looked down and swallowed hard. "But I'm someone with principles. Some questions must be answered clearly. Will you tell me, or not? If you don't, I'm leaving now." Rocky pinched my waist and pushed me down. "What else could it be? I'm 28, so naturally, I want to get married." "Marry whom?" "Marry the woman who, after many years, first met me and ripped off my pants." "Rocky." I was so angry that I tried to hit him, but Rocky just watched me with a smile, not avoiding, letting me hit him several times. "Are you done?" He slowly sat up and gave me a light slap on the butt. "Now it's my turn to hit you, Rocky." I glared at him, fuming. Rocky lowered his head and kissed me gently. "Haley, I've liked you for many, many years." The end. If you like Puppy's story, please follow and like it. Updated every morning at 9 a.m.